I want to welcome you tonight, and I'll introduce myself. I'm Dr. Blaine Jones. This is Mark DeWitt, Mayor of Hawkins County, and Pastor John Butler, pastor of East Rogersville Baptist Church, and I'm going to ask Pastor Butler to open our meeting with prayer tonight.
Let's pray, if you don't mind. Father, thank you for the outpouring from our community and the concern about different crisis situations that we face, and it seems like we face on a more increasing intensity these days. So as we sit and talk tonight, we pray that you just guide us, fill our hearts with compassion to help us be able to understand how to help people in our community in those crisis situations better. Father, we pray that you would just give us the understanding of your truth tonight, and that we would do everything to give you glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Come on in. Come on in. Now we can really start.
Yeah. Get up close. Already here.
I'm going to start right here with Jamie. If everyone would, there's some faces in here that we don't recognize. If you just introduce yourself, tell us your interest in being here tonight, we greatly appreciate it.
I'm Johnny Miller. I'm the Hawkins County EMA Director.
I'm Tom Kern, County Commissioner.
Randy Price, I work for the EMA also.
I'm Jeff Hilton. I'm with the Hawkins County Rescue Squad.
Becky Hicks, Pastor First Baptist Church in Orem.
Right.
Brian Pager, just a citizen.
Wes Trent, Bureau Baptist.
Woody Boyd, just a Jesus follower.
Jake Jacobs, Amy Mill.
Sheldon Livesey with One Accord Ministry.
Back here to Sue.
Sue Berkeley, concerned citizen.
Your blessed to take.
Hi, I'm my United Way and some civic organizations.
Pam knows everything there is to know about everything in East Town.
Ed Tomlinson, East Rogersville Baptist Church, and I have concerns about the homeless and if it's the right thing to do to get involved.
Right.
Gene Cobb, God's Blueprints.
Larry Nelson, American Red Cross.
Jody Sutherland, Connections Network, and One Accord Ministry.
Gerald Macher, God's Blueprints.
Jack Parker, retired, University of Tennessee.
Dick Jenkins, East Rogersville Baptist Church, Associate Pastor of Care Ministry, and work group coordinator for the Hawkins County Sheriff's Office.
Ronnie Lawson, Sheriff, Hawkins County.
Mark Elam and my wife Karen, East Rogersville Baptist Church.
Donna Putnam, I'm a prisoner of St. Henry's. Kristen Savaraja, St. Henry. Ellen Harton, concerned citizen, St. Henry. Taylor Walters, Hospice Christian State Community Club, Center. Loretta Short, Christian Band Community Club.
Gilroy Courtney, pastor of Faith Assembly. James Burleson, Faith Assembly Church.
Eva Burleson, Faith Assembly Church.
Marvin Chaplin, Veteran Center of East Tennessee.
Michael Paul, Veteran Center of East Tennessee.
Jessica Paul, Veteran Center.
And Bill Sharp just walked in.
Bill Sharp, East Rogersville Baptist Church.
Well, folks, I appreciate y'all coming. Jeff Bobo asked what we're calling this meeting, and quite honestly, we really don't have a name for it right now. But I'll tell you where this all started and where we're at, and I'll let Pastor Butler explain what happened here recently. But for those of you that don't know, Mark and I have had a nonprofit organization called Foursquare Inc. for 15, 16 years, if not longer.
And I'm here in that capacity tonight, not necessarily as mayor of Hawkins County.
I wouldn't have you here. But seriously, we've had this organization, and our focus has been the community of Rogersville and Hawkins County. It's the umbrella organization for People Loving People, which is the Thanksgiving dinner that we've done for again, for 15, 16 years. 17, okay. And we've had to transition that a little bit in the last couple of years due to a couple of different factors. Working with Sheldon and going forward to do that. Also, we had under that umbrella the 4th of July celebration, which we thought we'd retired from, but we continue to do a fireworks show. We still need to talk about that, don't we?
Yeah.
We've done tornado relief for Greene County. If y'all recall, several years ago, they had some bad tornadoes over in Greene County. We did a concert and fundraiser for them. We took all kinds of clothing, refrigerators, ovens, over $10,000 in cash. We just put on an event to raise money for them. So those are some of the things that we've done. And one thing that comes up it seems like every winter, I'll call Mark and I say, Mark, it's getting ready to be 10 degrees. We need, to do something. Well, we try and coordinate something, and we never really came up with much. One year we came close. I think we had the rescue squad to cooperate with us to let us put a few cots in, and we were going to get maybe get the crewettes to cook, and it turned out we only had one person that we had to shelter, and it was an older lady from across the mountain, and we just got a hotel room, got her some meals, took care of it that way. But it seems like every winter we call each other and we say, we need to do something. Well, this year it came up again, and Pastor Butler beat us to it. He went ahead and did something. And John, if you don't mind, just explain what you did and how it worked out.
Yeah, just so we don't get off point, what we're not trying to do tonight is try to figure out how to do a homeless shelter or something like that. That is not the purpose. Tonight really is about crisis situations. Since I've been here in 2017, we've faced a lot of flooding issues where people were displaced a couple of different times. We just recently faced the forest fires across the hill that kind of were threatening the downtown area. People were displaced there, and now this frigid weather. So our focus really is that, and it's been my focus, I think, for many years, and I've had experience in disaster relief on the ground in immediate situations. Evacuating hurricanes, disaster relief for tornadoes and things like that. Really hitting home very close to our church that I've pastored in places. So when the frigid weather came, I reached out to Mark to see if there was anything to be done. I hadn't heard anything, but we really haven't had to deal with such a long-term. I know 4 days for people. Some of you guys moved in from the north, and don't laugh. 4 days in single-degree weather is a big deal around here. It's just like 30-degree weather. I was laughing at people in Douglas, Georgia, when I moved down there, and it was freezing. Well, that's what happens in the winter, right? But those situations require a response, and as a pastor, the compassionate thing is to figure out how to respond in a way that we can care for people. The last thing I want to know is somebody froze to death when I could have done something. When I talked to Mark early that morning, nothing was to be done. I stepped out because I've got good support from my church, and I said, we'll do something. And then I went to the church and told them what I had committed them to do. And they responded. Disasters don't pick a really convenient time to happen. So we opened up as a warming shelter, a place where people could go. We did have homeless people there, primarily homeless people. Most people didn't leave their house, which is a good thing. Although the rolling power outages really kind of messed with people, and we haven't experienced that before. But we had 4 to 5 people pretty much most of the time we were open. We had people that they would come and they would go. I don't regret doing what we did. However, it seems like these incidents are getting closer and closer together. And I just think my heart is to try to get the churches to get together, because I think that's where most of the ministry ought to take place, is churches come together to help. However, we can't do stuff. I'm thankful the Red Cross brought us blankets. We got cots from the EMA here, and we were able to do that. We don't have those resources, but the county does and other agencies do. So I think that's really the whole reason that we decided to get together. After the event happened, I sat down with Mark and Dr. Jones, and we just thought that maybe we needed to call the community together, people that were interested, to see if we could somehow start coming up with a plan for the community to respond, because just a few days that we were open, people were desperately trying to help. And that's a good thing. And you never want to turn that away, but people wanted to come by, they're bringing bottles of water and sodas and donuts, and I've got all this food that I don't know what to do with. But if we're able to work together and have a plan where it's not just one church or one agency's responsibility to take care of that, one, it brings the community together, and two, it lightens the load on certain individuals and agencies. So that's our goal tonight, is to start this conversation and see where we might be able to go. And I don't know that we're looking to build an organization or a new club in town. I don't know, but we're looking to start the conversation.
Thank you, Pastor Butler. Like you said, we're getting to where we're starting to see more and more things happen in our community, in our county, that catch us off guard sometimes, like the fires. Flooding seems to happen now every spring, and people are displaced sometimes they're not. The frigid temperatures may be coming again next weekend. Some of the models are projecting the same kind of weather we have around Christmas time. So, we need to be ready for those things, and that's why we wanted to get together tonight and invite people in our community. Like Pastor Butler said, churches, that's one of our big focuses. That's, believers ought to understand that we're here to serve. That's what God put us here for, is to love one another and to serve one another. And that's the whole premise of Foursquare Inc. and people loving people. So Mark and I have always wanted to do this, and when Pastor Butler went ahead and did it, we said, okay, let's get together, let's talk, and let's see if we can't make this something that happens when something's triggered. And that's what we're here tonight to try and figure out. What all would be needed. He was able to get his church to come up with volunteers to staff the warming shelter. Some other churches staffed it and helped provide food. But you don't want to depend on one church, one organization over and over. It kind of wears you out, and you maybe not get as good a response as you keep going down the road. We've got several organizations here today that we can lean on that have experience in different things. Like he said, most of the folks that came homeless, and quite honestly, Mark and I have always, that's the people that we're concerned about. We really hadn't thought outside of that. But again, it's not just for the homeless, it's for anybody that's displaced. We need to make plans for anybody that doesn't have a place to get warm or have a place to go to eat a meal. Eventually, we'd like to have a place that has bathrooms and showers that they can utilize if they're there for a couple of days. So that's where this discussion, I hope, will go tonight. We're here for input. I came up with an agenda. I think we've explained what our purpose and our mission is, and that's to provide a place for those that are displaced, whether they're homeless, whether they're in a home and they have to leave their home. We don't know what's going to happen. We want to have a place available for folks to be able to come to, have a place to lay their head down at night, have a place that they can eat a meal, eventually that and take care of their hygiene needs. That's the goal. That's what we would like to see. So on our agenda, we got what all is needed. The first thing on there is a decision tree. Who makes the call? Normally in big things, I think Jamie would be the one that would say, hey, we've got a crisis situation and we need a place for people that are displaced to come to. I think that's where the call, I assume.
Usually we're the first to identify that need in the community, and something large like that Parks is the second phone is gonna ring of, hey, we've got into a scenario here that we're gonna have to start moving people out or whatever. Where we run into that huge need is in the initial response, even if it is a disaster that like the American Red Cross is gonna get involved in. If that's a county response, you may get some assistance pretty quickly. If it's something regional, you have a large need there that could be a long duration. If you had a facility like what you're talking about in your long-term goals, I'm sure that would be identified as other uses that it could be used for organizations like that for a longer situation too.
I think you have to decide what the criteria is to make the call.
Correct.
You know, is it only when lives are at risk, or is it before that?
I'll give you an example of the fire. We identified that pretty rapidly. We knew that fire was wind-driven in Intertown.
Okay.
We knew that fire was wind-driven. We knew the dozers were gonna have quite some time before they could get that line put in. The initial time period they gave me is they didn't know how long it would take them to get that contained. That's when we made the decisions to use the natural barriers of that roadway the whole way around as their evacuation zone. That displaced 100 houses by our CAD system was what was within that evacuation zone, and that decision was made on the side of that mountain, just seeing that fire progress. Some of these decisions, some of this weather-related stuff, you have more time to plan for, like this freeze event. For a couple of days, we knew, hey, these days are going to be bad, so sometimes that decision's a little differently on how quickly that decision gets made, or if you have any time to prep for that. So that's just two examples, and there's multiple we can think of.
Jamie, if it's okay, because a lot of people probably don't know, the fire came in, you guys get the call. What is the process that you have to make to determine who do you call, and what are kind of the things that you have to, the protocols that you've got to do? Because I think there's a lot of people in the room, mostly church associated or not have any kind of association, that would like to be able to help and do something. Who all do you call in your list and let know that something's going on?
What we did in that particular instance, we made the determination that the evacuation was required and lives were in danger ahead of that fire line. We made that determination. We basically called all emergency services to the scene that was available just to make announcements. We used our mass notification system to advise those residents in that area to evacuate. What we did in that particular situation is use the rescue squad as a temporary evacuation area, just because we have this immediate need. We needed these people moved 10 minutes ago, and they're still in their houses. We have to have somewhere to tell them to go. So in our mass notification, we used the rescue squad building to move those people to as an initial evacuation area. The Red Cross was the next call that I made to start prepping something for a long-term situation for those. And they have some places like schools and churches and stuff like that designated as post-disaster shelters. They don't get involved in like warming stations and pre-storm and stuff like that at all. So, but a disaster like that, they get involved on the long-term needs as far as banning, and they were going to use the middle school for that particular incident, if I'm not mistaken. So,
They were.
is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So Jamie and I are on the phone all the time, basically every day, about stuff. So when that decision is made, though, what we need from this group is a point person who would mobilize the rest of this group, so that we can make that one call, and then the tree goes out.
Some other, and I just want to mention this up front, some other needs we get into sometimes is church buses. Well, we use school buses too, but I know a lot of churches have buses that fit the need of moving mass numbers of people quickly. A lot of those buses are set up better for rehab scenarios too. And if we've got somebody fighting fire, they have air conditioning, versus some school buses does, and some do, some don't. So we have some need there that we've used in the past too for buses, for transportation, for mass numbers of people.
So this, obviously, we're not just gonna go out here and try and wing something on our own. It's all gonna have to be a coordinated effort with Jamie in his office, with the sheriff in his office, with, Mark's gonna take his four square hat off for a minute and be the mayor in his office. It's all gonna have to be coordinated, but like Mark has said and Jamie has said, we need to have an organization in place for when they need it. When the Red Cross is not gonna be able to step in and do something like the frigid temperatures we have, that's not an area that they're gonna step in and say, okay, we're gonna designate this area as a warming shelter. That's where something that we're gonna have to organize and communicate to them will be available. They let us know, we get the word out, it's set up, they bring in the cots, we organize the food, we organize people to stay with them, whatever. So
Well, what I would suggest, I don't mean to interrupt you, Blaine, but, you've got these points on here: volunteers, bedding, food, hygiene, safety, security, medicine, that kind of thing. If we had one person to say, all right, this person's gonna call the person who's in charge of volunteers, you're gonna call the person who's in charge of bedding, you're gonna call the person who's in charge of food, et cetera. And then each one of these categories, that person then mobilizes that group and gets them together. Does that sound all right to you, James?
Another thing too, and I don't want to step, I'm just using the rescue squad for example, because we used them in that fire. We can identify different areas in the county for that. But sometimes we have locations like the rescue squad that is an emergency organization. A lot of times they're heavily engaged in the emergency. So it may be a scenario where we may need personnel just to man a point like that temporarily until we can get something else set up.
Well, the volunteers to stay at these places is a big part of this. Because that's what Pastor Butler had the hardest time getting together.
Especially when it comes on a holiday weekend or something like that, and I don't want to down anybody. At Christmas, my favorite place is not to be down there, but a lot of people stepped up. However, at the spur of the moment, it's really hard to do that. But if we begin this planning process and you've got your organization, 10 people that are willing to say, we'll do this, and you can call them about any time, and out of that 10 people, you can get 5 of them there, that's a great thing. So I think Mark's probably right. If we can develop some type of system, like it says on the thing, some kind of tree where you've got a point person, and then maybe all these different types of needs that we have underneath there, have somebody, and they have their own, they kind of form their own little committee, they talk to each other, and that way the point person can put out a text or a call to those others in that leadership area where they can bring all the resources together that's needed.
The people responding to these needs in those categories, the biggest part is, where do you go? I mean, are there other churches out there that have fellowship halls that would be willing to open to do this kind of thing? There may be a time where we have to have more than one location. But if your church, and I don't know if you're prepared to say anything tonight, or if you have to go back to your group at church, your elders, or whatever, if we could have a list of places, and maybe it's not churches, maybe somebody knows of another place that we could put some people on a temporary basis. But if we had that in place, then the volunteers would know, all right, we're going to send them to X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Mark, I was going to say, if you, now I'm west from Durham, the guys open doors for us to be able to purchase the Kepler school.
Exactly.
So that, and hopefully we'll be closing right here in just a couple of weeks.
So we'll have
Kepler.
Kepler.
One opportunity that we would offer to.
All right, so we've got Kepler.
And one of the things that we need to remember is dynamically in our county, we have some divisions that we have to work on. Durham is on the other side of the river, which is really good, because if something happens to the bridge for some reason and you can't get over, there's somebody over there. The roads 3 years ago, both highways washed out going across the mountain, so you had to go all the way down to Mooresburg and around to get over there. So having different places throughout the map area of our county is really, really probably very important.
So
for us
I
to
think
do.
that's something that Jamie and I could, if we had a list, we could geographically say. And when we call that one person from here, say we're mobilizing to Kepler School, or we're mobilizing to East Rogersville, or whatever, to the regular school.
So Jamie would be the one that would designate emergency.
Myself or the mayor.
Jamie and
has to declare
I.
the emergency. Yeah.
Is there any buildings in Rogersville or Hawkins County that are designated as emergency shelters?
There's multiple through the Red Cross, but like I said, that is totally post-disaster type sheltering. They won't do anything with heating, cooling stations, or pre-storm, and the Red Cross will be able to probably speak on that.
But, what we do is we go ahead of time and inspect them, that way we know how many showers, bathrooms, or handicap accessible, if there's cafeteria, feeding area, so we predetermine that. And, if there's nothing, it would be a good idea if you have, just as a suggestion, if we can provide that list to them and have them use that pre-stages. And then that way you're not having people at this location and saying, oh, well, hey, we need to move. They're always in place. So that would expedite it.
Okay.
We have facilities at First Baptist in Savannah to handle probably that area from there.
Okay.
Our Family Life Center has bathrooms with showers and the whole 9 yards plus a kitchen.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I think our church is a disaster for Red Cross.
Okay. Okay. Tom, you know of anything up toward Churchill, Mount Carmel Way? Okay. Let us know.
Larry, can I ask you a
The
question?
church on Carter's Valley, I don't know what's the name of the big church on Carter's Valley.
Ridgeview.
Ridgeview.
But they're
There again, that's on Carter Valley side.
Right.
yeah.
I think that Mark was thinking maybe something right in Mount Carmel or Churchill.
I know that's kind of the Ridgeview kind of go-to location for the Red Cross in that area, if it's halfway close because of the facility they have there. Like we use that for the chemical response.
Larry, is there a criteria that you guys have established? I'm assuming they are, because you come and look at our building and kind of set us up, that we could get and give to churches so they could look and see if their facility would be like up to Red Cross standards?
We've got a checklist, I can provide a checklist, and obviously, the more accommodating, the better, but then we have to look at the location.
Right.
If we have something that does not have handicap ramps, but it's the only thing available to accommodate 25, 30 people,
Right.
then we're going to use that, and we're going to make whatever accommodations we
Right.
can. If they don't have, for example, showers, we can get shower trailers brought in, things like that, so. But that's why we do the pre-assessment for location, so we know what we do, and what we have and can work with, or we can bring in.
But you're looking at what, I'm with Red Cross volunteer too. The Red Cross does, like you said, after the disaster happened.
Right.
What we're talking about, weather related and, the warming stations and all that, that needs to be set up, that will be set up separate from Red Cross getting involved because they're not involved at this time.
Right.
So
But it would be great to set it up
But
as pre-approved Red Cross.
if we knew what kind of standards they had, and churches could look and evaluate their own facilities and say, we would be a good candidate for that, that would help, that would just give the churches a tool to make their own evaluation.
There's a lot of those, I mean, several in Hawkins County, because I've signed up some of them. And they're even the schools for that as far as post-disaster goes. But, we're also looking at stuff other than that may not be.
Yeah, we have more, Randy, we have more the flooding situations, the frigid temperatures where they're not gonna really
Right.
step in, that's what we need to work on.
Well, you also have to take into consideration on these places, and Jamie and I and Congresswoman Harshbarger talked about it this morning, as far as, you know, these rolling blackouts. The schools would be a great place for everybody to go. They've got gas heat, but if there's no electricity, there's nothing to push that heat around.
And all the sprinklers went off
And
during
yeah,
the.
well, you know, ideally, we'd have someplace that has a generator, you know, that kind of thing. But my pipe dream is this building somewhere that's big enough to fit everybody in, that we can flip the switch when we go in there and everything's there and ready to go. But you know, that's not gonna happen.
You also have to realize that that building might not be there in a disaster.
Right, exactly. That's why it's good to gather all these places.
So the armory. Let me,
Armory.
go ahead.
I just have a quick question. So in this crisis management plan, is there any plans to try to help populations that can't necessarily get to the warming stations, such as older adults or?
Yeah, I think that's part of, that's kind of part of the plan. Like Jamie had said earlier, the church buses to help evacuate people and things like that. I think that ought to definitely be a part of that. But I don't know that we can really, I mean, we can talk about these different crises, but maybe we need to talk about the attributes of the point person that would be responsible, because if we have a crisis situation and Jamie's got to make some kind of call, he doesn't need to call 5 people. He's already calling a list of people. We don't need to add. So what does that point person look like in this community? Who do we look to for something like that? Or the availability? What type of person is that going to be?
One thing that we need to look at too is this point person. We need to, the church groups need to provide a list of what they have that they're willing to let the group use. Vans, kitchens, stoves, any kind of emergency apparatuses or whatever, usefulness of an emergency.
Will there be a call number where folks can, like, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, like if I'm an older adult, how do I know to access those services? So will we have a centralized call?
Yeah, I think the point person would have a call number. You know, we could set something up, but that's a great idea. You know, lots of different ways to contact them. But if they don't have a cell phone, their phone lines are down, you know, it's tough. It's tough to plan for everything.
It begins to go, in that initial phase, you have to rely heavily on them, the EMA people, because they're going to be going through, for instance, when I was in Chattanooga, 1 year apart, tornadoes come through and devastated 2 different areas of Chattanooga. In one area, 7 people were killed. And for all night, they came through, they stopped at 8 o'clock, it got dark, and they were digging through rubble all night. All the emergency personnel are there responding like they should be, but they get very, very weary. So if they are able to call a point person, and if we need to form some type of organization, that person is there, and have a designated phone number or a Facebook page or whatever that looks like, but that person could start so that we as a community could begin to support them. And Jamie would say, hey, to this point person, we need some church buses to get over there. We've got to get these people out of this area right now. Can you have me 5 buses or 5 vans lined up at this particular place, like at the rescue squad, if that's where you're staging everything? We need 5 church vans right now at the rescue squad. Then that point person looks down to volunteers or whatever group we have and say, hey, listen, I need this. Can you reach out to those people and do it? And I think that's what it kind of looks like.
I think that point person or that group of leaders or whatever you want to call it, big idea to have multiple there where redundancy if someone was on vacation or out of town or whatever. But we've learned, by doing this job, I've learned if you have a need, this community will do everything in their power to fulfill that need. a lot of times it's like you're saying, using a social media page or something to put that need out there, that it's huge, and we don't necessarily have the time to manage that side of it because we're responding to the crisis ourselves. So that's huge. We saw that in a recent multi-week search operation in this county, and the sheriff can vouch for this. We were having to cut supplies off because we were getting just ran over with, so we got to cut water off because you had more water than you could store. So this community is great to our emergency responders. I'm sure the majority of the people in this room were involved in making that happen.
Yeah,
And that operation and several more.
It's a big,
Yeah.
it's amazing to what was donated, and, you know, how the community gets together. We asked for 50 bags of ice and got like 200 bags of ice into the freezer.
But that point person or that group of managers kind of managing that's huge in something like this.
Bill Sharp,
Yeah, I volunteered to be one person.
one of the points.
But you're gonna need more than one.
Yeah.
What if I'm not for?
Right.
Well, Mark and I have experience with getting, quote unquote, getting the word out. So I think that, especially if we've got the EMA director and the county on board with this, I think that we will be able to come up with an advertise. You were asking how would people know? We'll get a page out there. We'll get a phone number out there. We'll make it available. If people need help in a situation like that they can get in touch with us.
And I know
if they have service, you know.
WRGS is great about getting stuff out. So if we tell people that's where you listen, but at the same time, their power went down. So, you know, it's kind of tough sometimes. Jamie.
In a large disaster like that, media presence is not going to be a problem. I mean, we're going to have all the media presence we need in that side of the disaster for information pushed out.
You know, maybe it's a Facebook page dedicated to this, and you know have. And I'm sitting here trying to think, how are we going to get everybody's names in the right places? And that's going to be like herding cats. But you know, if we can, you got any ideas?
Well, we're not going to come out of tonight with a
Right.
solution.
Right. But we need to know how we're going to gather it.
Right.
And resources.
So what I think that, or suggest that we do, is that each of us go back to our organization, whether it be a church or a civic organization or whatever, and contact other churches and other civic organizations that you know of, and say, look, we're trying to do something, get organized, that if we have this situation, we have a building that we can go to, we have a contact person that's going to get in touch with others to arrange transportation, or bedding, or food, or medical, or whatever it is that we need. And we'll get these things organized. That's the whole purpose of tonight's meeting, was to see, is anybody even interested in helping do this, getting organized? Obviously, yes.
And I think that it's key that you let us know what you think you can do, but let's not get everybody deciding they're gonna bring food, because, you know, or not everybody deciding they're gonna, you know, take care of showers or whatever, because we don't wanna duplicate a whole lot of effort. We wanna make this as streamlined and as easy as we can make it. And just roll it into action just as quick as we can.
I think the biggest thing that we do need from organizations or people is what can my organization do? What kind of
your
facilities we
resources
have?
and what can we rely on you to do?
Because that's in the when we opened as a warming station, we opened up Thursday night?
Yeah.
We went through Thursday night. Well, we decided to close the warming station temporarily Friday because God's Blueprint was open from 10 to 3 or whatever that time is. And there was no reason for us to staff when they were going to be at theirs. And it's hard enough to get people to staff anyway. So if we know what organizations and churches and stuff have, that list of resources, then we can better off begin to plan those needs as they come up. And I think again, I think really, if we've got a decent pool of names that we can look to maybe as at least potentials for that one leadership spot, that we can talk to and address, and kind of search that out in the next few weeks, that would help. And then if we get that one person, we begin to fill in some of those other leadership spots that would fall under that. And the one thing that I know, and we're Baptists, most of us in the room. Sorry, Billy Ray. Baptists like to eat, so do everybody else down here in the South. There is one thing that we don't have a problem fixing, and that is food. And Jamie just mentioned it. That is the least of our worries. And when this crisis come up, I was asked by someone in the church, what about food? I was like, don't worry about food. Once somebody knows there's a need, we'll have more food than we can shake a stick at. And sure enough, within 2 hours, we had every meal accounted for. And people were calling, we want to bring, well, we've already got it. And they brought it anyway.
Well, it has to be scalable, and we have to get that word out too. I mean, it might affect 2 people, might affect 2,000 people. You don't know. So, once that tree starts rolling, we're going to have to say, we're expecting X number of people, and not overwhelm it with, a bunch of different things that we have to figure out what to do with later on.
Yes, ma'am.
Does a staffing person have any qualifications, or is this somebody to coordinate people moving around?
Well, like the point person, I think that's a discussion that we need to have. I would say there probably are some qualifications, but we don't know exactly what that is. Obviously, somebody that might be well-known or has enough connections to be able to reach out to a wide variety of people. Beyond that, I don't know. Obviously, they need to be accessible. Somebody that has to have a phone number and that can answer a phone all the time and different things like that. But that really needs to be probably priority number one for us, is to talk about some of those names that might fit that category, or whatever that place, whatever that person looks like, those characteristics.
And as far as down the line staffing, the individual location probably knows the folks that are going to be there. We don't want to put people in there that, aren't mentally capable of doing it, aren't, that want somebody, with a criminal record kind of thing. But as far as that goes, each individual location probably can more or less vet their own folks. And that's kind of what John did for this one.
And what I did, in order to do this, listen, churches, if you're going to have other people in your church, it's Christmas, and I'm like, there is no way I'm going to fill all of these volunteer slots. And we had primarily homeless. We have to have eyes on, period. Well, we've also got to deal with insurance somehow or another. The only way I could really even remotely come close to vetting people that were going to be there and watch people when maybe none of my other people were going to be there was to do it through the pastors. So I contacted the pastors. I need the people on your security team to be able to do this. And that's primarily where we got most of our help. Either I knew them personally, or a pastor vouched because they were on their security team at their church and they came. That's the best I could do in the midst of this. However, I think as we go through, it might be a good idea for us to look at those people that are going to be some of those volunteers. We probably do need some standards for them. And maybe their willingness to do a background check, and we do a background check on those, and just have a list of people that are ready to do that. Because as a pastor, if I'm going to bring people into my church, my responsibility is their safety in every way. And that is the priority, is to make sure they're safe and cared for in that facility. And the worst thing that we can do is to have somebody in the middle of the night doing something that they shouldn't be doing that's one of our volunteers. So yeah, there has to be some kind of standard there. And that's the reason my default was contacting pastors and saying, hey, I need some of your security guys, because most churches around here have a little security team, and they kind of look out for that. And most of them, I think, have went through some type of process of being vetted by their own church. So that was my default position. And I think we need to do something like that with these volunteers that will be in those roles.
This is probably not the crowd to say this to, but we also have a need for other locations that may not be affiliated with churches. You know, a lot of the folks that could have come wouldn't because it was affiliated with a church. So if we can think of any other buildings, any other places to go, you know, Rescue Squad may be one. Talk about the Armory, maybe one too.
Just popped into my head, what about the Boys and Girls Club?
We'd have to ask them.
I don't know who runs that or whatever, but
Yeah.
that was just a thought.
YMCA.
That's a YMCA program. I can
Brother Rick?
Okay.
I can talk to them.
My daughter actually runs the YMCA
Yeah.
Private Providers, which is the former Boys and Girls Club. It's actually owned by the YMCA. They'd have to get approval for the use of the building through the YMCA, which is housed in Kingsport. The building doesn't have showers, but it does have laundry facility.
That's a kitchen.
It does have space.
McFeeder's Bend is one.
And another thing that popped into my head.
Speaking, if I could just add something.
Go ahead, Rick.
We're talking about trying to organize something here that, and I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. Take the name Baptist off of it. The Baptists have the disaster relief program.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about doing is not like the Red Cross, not like the Tennessee Baptist Disaster Relief, because they show up after the disasters happen. We're talking about crisis intervention.
Right.
But the layout and the skeletal format is ideal for what we're looking at here. Every state has a coordinator. That coordinator sends out a message to county coordinators, and the county coordinator sends it out to their individual team. So what we have to do is we need a Hawkins County Emergency Crisis Coordinator who works hand in hand with the mayor and with the EMS, who then has people underneath them who are over volunteers, transportation, communication. You've got your list in place. When the word comes out and a thing goes in need, you contact those people. People then who are interested sign up for the specific area where they want to work. We have people who are trained in mud out, we have people who are trained in chainsaw, we have people who run forklifts, we have people who run scissor jacks, we have people that can put roofs on, we have people who are specialized in their area of service, and you just call those people and they respond. And you've got a skeletal process already in place. So
We've had a hand up back here for a long time.
change the name, put it in place.
Back.
Thank you, Rick.
We had the Veterans Center up, and we had it open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, just during the cold snap.
Okay.
And we had someone there that sat with the veterans the whole time. They could come in, take a shower, take them a bite, take a nap, whatever.
So you opened that to veterans exclusively? Okay. Okay. Okay.
It would have to be brought up to our board of
Right.
directors to do.
Anything past that. But that's a viable location, viable, you know, just, if it's just for veterans, that would work.
We have washer and dryer, we have a shower, we have full-size kitchen, everything.
Okay. Woody, did you have your hand up?
Yeah. You talk a lot about logistics and buildings, but you gotta train people. And I'll speak to my experience. I was working with the Greene County Emergency Management when the tornadoes hit. I was in the EMC and my job was communications coordination in all the agencies. You ask somebody to man a shelter that's not been trained,
right,
that doesn't know what they're getting into,
right,
it will not work. So buildings and showers and kitchens are important. But if people don't understand roles and responsibilities and what they shouldn't do, you're not going to be nearly as effective.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I'll say that happened to us, so We knew the tornadoes were coming. They'd already blown up Chattanooga, Huntsville. We closed all the schools at 2 o'clock. We opened the EMC, and we ran about a day and a half solid. And what happens when you have a widespread disaster like that is Jamie's counterpart and all his staff, you need 100 of them. And the government cannot staff for those potential disasters. But if you have a bunch of rookies that don't know what they're doing, you're gonna get in a mess. So part of this whole process has to be training.
Right.
I'm just curious, to train people to staff a shelter, a warming shelter, where can you go and?
We did that as part of the emergency management team down in Greene County. And we did first aid, and Jamie and I have done some stuff together like that. Simple first aid stuff, but you're gonna have, in the case of the 5 tornadoes that went through, you need hundreds of people.
But with that, did the Red Cross come in and?
Afterwards, yeah.
Larry, do you guys do any kind of training?
Yes, because we, in fact.
Like he's talking about is,
Well, that'd be more of a scale down what we do, but it's easier to scale down than it is to scale up.
Right.
Because you have a training. Yeah, we'd be more than happy to train as many people as would be interested on shelter operations. Keep in mind, like I say, ours is a little bit more intense because we have to look at the federal guidelines for sex offenders. How do you secure, the medications, morphine, things like this, insulin, stuff like that. So, but for what you're talking about, you wouldn't be faced with those. But I'm just kind of giving you an idea of the two differences. But we would go into all that, how to coordinate the feeding and all this other kind of stuff. So yeah, just put in a request and we'd be more than happy, and we'll schedule a day and a time to do that.
Yeah, people are gonna bring their pets and not in cages. We had snakes, we had birds.
Hey, not in my church. Not in my church. We're not snaking in the church.
You have to be prepared to handle those kind of things because they will happen.
That's what another thing I was gonna bring up is, how can we coordinate for those people that refuse to evacuate without their pets?
Right.
What would be needed? I mean, the shelter has, talking out, I'm here as a citizen, but I'm sure the shelter can help in that kind of aspect.
Let me make this suggestion. Like I said, we're not gonna have a solution tonight. We've had some good discussion, open discussion, and I'm hoping that our members of the media here can help us get this word out. But one thing I think we need to do is hit up our, like I said earlier, hit up our organization, whether it be a church or a civic organization or whatever, and say, hey, number one, we're gonna need people to staff this place. That's another thing we've got to do is decide some buildings that we can utilize and how we're going to go in that pecking order. The big key is getting volunteers. It's not food. It's not bedding. Jamie has cots, not blankets. I think y'all brought the blankets for the warming shelter. It's people that are trained and know how to work in a shelter. We've heard from Mr. Boyd. We've heard from Red Cross that they would be willing to train. Let's go back to our groups and say, hey, we're trying to get a team together. If something were to happen, like the frigid temperatures, like the flooding, and we have to open a building, would you be willing to work? And if so, would you be willing to go through some training and possibly background check?
Of course, we need to get more than we think we'll need.
Yeah.
Because, if it happens like again at Christmas time, then, not everybody's better. Sorry, I didn't.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
But let me just finish out with this. Go back, recruit these people, get these people lined up, and let's be in contact and get the training set up. In the meantime, we need names of people that might want to be coordinators. Who would want to be the coordinator of the food and say, okay, we've got to call Persia Baptist Church. They're up for food this time. Let's get them. We've got 20 people in this warming shelter. Let's go. And they have their people to contact. We need one person to be, a couple of people to be the contact people to get the subgroups. And you don't want to do it the way I normally do it. Mark always makes a big issue. If you make eye contact with me, you're going to be in charge of something. So it's better to volunteer and say, hey, I'd like to help in this area, or I'll be glad to pitch in here. DocJones57@hotmail.com. Email me and say, I'm interested in heading this up, and we'll see what we can do. I think that we need to have another meeting pretty quick. Everybody go back to their organizations, hit up other organizations, hit up other churches in your area, hit up other civic organizations here in town, and say, look, would y'all be willing to help? And with Jeff and Wade and Tessa, and I'm sorry, I'm not sure. This Channel 11, if we get the word out, we can get other people involved, and we can make this thing big enough to work.
On that note, if I can interject this, because I've been through several hurricanes when I was in South Georgia, and evacuees and taking care of them, dealing with the Red Cross and opening shelters in our church in Chattanooga. Two major, the tornadoes that touched down in Greene County came through Tuscaloosa and Chattanooga and up, and so when I got here, one of the things that I wanted to do, I wanted to make sure our church was ready to take care of our people if something happened. So I've got a group at our church that they've come up, and we are working through an emergency plan for our church. We've got it down on paper. We're tweaking it. We've pulled from a lot of different resources. And what I tasked our little group to do is to come up with this plan, and let's make it in a way that we can share it with other churches so that they can do that for their own churches. And that prepares their church, including finding resources within the church. I remember back in the floods, we were calling everybody, do you have pumps? People have basements full of water, and we don't have any pumps, and we're trying to find people that have pumps to pump water out of the basement. So hopefully in a few weeks or so, we're going to have our plan completed. And at that point, our heart is to share it with every church that will take it and encourage them to look it over and implement it in their church. So that way, like you said, we've got these circles, we've got these churches, and if we're taking care of our people plus the little bit around us, we end up taking care of a whole lot of people. But that still doesn't eliminate the necessity of Jamie saying, hey, we've got this, and he needs to call somebody, because Jamie doesn't need to have a phone number for every church. He needs to be able to call somebody that can look at that area and say, hey, I'll take care of contacting somebody there.
Why does somebody contact individual churches?
I'm going to speak through my interpreter. He's got an idea.
I'll kind of give some insight on how that works on our side, and I wasn't in Greenville's EOC during the 2011 tornadoes, but I'm sure it's how it works, because it's how it works in all of them. EOCs work with unmet needs. You've got a whole list of unmet needs out here, so churches, all the time, like what you're speaking about, they meet these needs without us even knowing it. We're sitting there going, we've got multiple people at this house that needs evacuated. We've got other situations here that need to be taken care of. And you're constantly working on unmet needs. So when those needs are fulfilled, we honestly don't care where it's fulfilled from, to be honest with you, whether it's a community church that just went out and took care of that individual and took them somewhere or whatever. But we just mark that one off the list and keep working on unmet needs, and I'm sure Woody can echo that's how it works.
Yeah, I think it goes back, Jack, to what we were talking about earlier. If we had these locations plotted out, if we've got a need, an unmet need in this area, that church is who we would call.
Why do you need to call the church? Why doesn't the church just deal with their own people? Why do I have to have some centralized person? Why isn't it just the responsibility of the individuals in the county and
if they will do it?
I'm also a big fan of self-reliance.
Yeah, but sometimes they don't even have the capability of taking care of that. That's the reason. That's the reason you need.
But then they need to figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
Basically, if there's an unmet need, just contact us, whether this group or someone else needs to fulfill that. We just have to know if there's a need, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
So you're gonna furnish us these stations already set up?
I can, what the process that it is.
Okay. And then we can go from there.
I'm a firm believer in not letting the meeting go much more than an hour, so let's.
Just, does anybody know what the homeless population of Rogersville and Hawkins County is?
Last I heard, it was in the high 20s.
40 plus.
40 plus.
I just heard all kinds of numbers.
The Rogersville area.
Yeah, well, and also, at least 76% of those is local people too, it's actually from here. Outside of that, we deal with people transits, and they usually don't stay a day or two, so really the ones that stays here, or more importantly, the ones that we deal with on a daily basis, that is actually from here, has family ties here, we keep up with them as far as where they're at.
At this time, we have no transients that travelers go through. It's more of a spring, then at the end of summer, because they have a plan. They already know where they're gonna go.
And move across
They know where they can go, they know where the stations are, they know where they can get fed, they know where they can get shelter. Our primary concern is internal, our local ones here, which is approximately 40 plus. We don't see them all, we average 20 a day. But they get cleaned, showered, fed. That means they're not eating out of your dumpsters.
What would you say is the average time those people are actually homeless?
I can't give you a number on that, because it could happen to you today. It could happen to you today, and so you're just one day, but somebody else, this could have been years. Your family could have been so impoverished that technically they don't have a place. You got teenagers still on the couch.
And there's a lot of mental challenges with all of that too.
Very large.
Yeah, so
Just like,
you don't know how, you may offer them help to make them not be homeless, but they would prefer what they're doing.
Well, that's another good question, is how many of those homeless people want to not be homeless? I mean,
if it's okay, let me draw.
I've seen a lot of folks up in Kingsport.
And they're okay,
It's like
and
a
they're in a
lifestyle.
stable date, they don't want to be homeless.
Let me,
They're in a psychotic or an episode, or something's gone, something's wrong, somebody swore at them, somebody threw something at them, they drive by. It's a different day, automatically.
let me draw this back in, because we got some homework to do. Did everybody sign in? That's a really important thing, so we can contact you, and you can, Blaine, if you would give them your email address, if you'd write this down.
Yeah.
Let's send all the correspondence, because I'm gonna give you some homework right now before we get to the point of dismissal.
you can email me at docjones57@hotmail.com. And, I have, the sign-up sheets, and I'll get them.
So here, we really need, in order to advance the game, we need two things. We need some names of leadership capabilities. Maybe there's somebody in your church or your organization that's just the go-to person. That would be a great name to put in there, okay? But also, we need info on the individual organizations, whether it's a church or a ministry or something, about what you have as far as resources that you have in your church. Like Wes goes back from Buren. What is it that Buren can do? Do we have some generators laying around? Yeah, we've got generators. We've got this. We've got that. We've got space. We've got food. Whatever. So if you could come up with that and maybe email names and a list of resources from your organization to Dr. Jones as soon as you possibly can, then we can begin to put some stuff together, and hopefully in 2 or 3 weeks down the road, maybe meet again and do put something in leadership. Have some kind of structure. I'm in agreement with Jack. I think we need to, people need to step up. Sometimes they don't. And Rick was talking about the disaster relief from Southern Baptist and what they do. I've been trained with them. They say, listen, if there's a crisis going on, you guys don't need us to come in. If you need us, let us know. And that's the reason Jamie needs to know if there's something big going on, I can call one person and they can be in contact, because that church might be impacted to the point where they can't do anything. They're overwhelmed. Like the tornadoes that came through a couple of years, I think 2020 in Putnam County, they were overwhelmed. And I had a team ready to go out and help them, and then all of a sudden they said, no, we don't need you. We've got so many other teams, you stay back, and we're gonna let these teams come in and do that. And that's fine, but in order to help assist them in that crisis, they need a point person from the community that can take care of those unknown needs, food, shelter, whatever it is in that moment. So if you can get those two things to Dr. Jones, names of people that would be potential leaders, whether they're going to be a leader of the whole thing or just one of the individual leaders, it doesn't matter right now. We just need some names to go by, and information on the resources that your organization might have. Like the veterans thing, I had no idea that you guys were off and running. It would have helped to know that, because we could have pointed people in that way. We don't want to be redundant where we don't need to be redundant. And that's, we can save and we can spread out the load, and it's just easier on everybody. So if you guys can do that in the next couple of weeks, it'd be really good.
I'll try and, we'll plan on meeting in 2 weeks again. I don't know if it'll be here. I'll try and get this room again. And I'll email you or get it to the press and they can get it out for us. But in 2 weeks, we'll get back together. In the meantime, y'all send me the information. I'll communicate forward, and we'll get something worked out here. I appreciate everybody coming. Anything else?
No.
I appreciate what everybody in this room's done prior to this. This is organization, but I know a lot of y'all have helped out with other emergencies in the past as well, so and we appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.